Are there any good cruise news stories and developments, or is it just an endless round of cancellations and cruising gloom? I'm Gary Bembridge, and in this episode of my Tips for Travelers, I sweep aside the news of cancellations, delays, and uncertainty about cruising to talk about what I think are 5 of the biggest, brightest, and most exciting good cruise news stories from around the world. Now, based on cancellations already announced, it is clear cruising, except for a few kind of limited regional exceptions, will be heading past a full year of shutdown really soon. Now, many people have assumed that the current state of the virus makes it unlikely that cruising will return on any scale until summer. So that's almost 18 months shutdown in total. Now, some lines, including Carnival Cruise Line, Princess Cruises, Holland America, Fred Olsen, for example, they have already cancelled some regions or individual ships right through into the Q4 2021 and some even into 2022. Now, ever since shutdown in March 2020, the constant worry for cruisers is that their favorite line would collapse. It would be shut down or perhaps merged into other lines. Now, this fear was especially fueled knowing that as many of the lines, as most of you know, are incorporated in tax-friendly countries. So they're not incorporated in the United States, UK, Germany, and so on. So this means they could not get any of the state bailouts that things like airlines and other travel groups have actually got to tie them over this whole period. So that's the bad news. What, if any, is the good news related to that? Well, the good news is that to date, only a very small handful of around about 5 smaller lines have disappeared so far, like Cruise and Maritime out of the UK, Pullman Tour, which was a Spanish joint venture with Royal Caribbean. But the really good news is that all the major lines are very well placed to survive through this storm. Now, according to their financial reports, the world's 3 largest cruise corporations, that's Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Group, and the Norwegian Group, they carry just over 70% of all cruise passengers worldwide. They have all been burning through a combined $1 billion every single month while their ships sit laid up. Now, this amount will increase as they move and start to recrew and prepare their ships to sail again. So monstrous amounts of money. Now, Carnival Corporation, they carry 37% of all passengers before the shutdown. They own 9 cruise lines. So that's Carnival Cruise Line, Holland America, Cunard, Princess, P&O Cruises, P&O Australia, Seabourn, AIDA, and Costa Cruises. They blew through $500 million every month in the last quarter. They actually cut that amount down from over $700 million by selling 18 ships last year. The Royal Caribbean Group, which, to remind you, they have Royal Caribbean Line, they have Celebrity Cruises, they have Azamara Cruises, and they have Silversea, and they're also joint ventures in Mein Schiff and Hapag-Lloyd in Europe. They're burning through $270 million every single month. Meanwhile, Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, which has 28 ships in their fleets, which covers Norwegian Cruise Line, Oceania, and Regent Seven Seas, they're burning through $175 million every single month. So the amount of cash that these groups alone are burning through is absolutely mind-boggling. It's way over like $12 billion so far already in the shutdown as of today. However, the really good news is that the financial community has enormous faith in the future of cruising, and all those 3 groups have been able to raise enough funds to keep going without any paying passengers until the end of summer 2021 to date. So they look to be incredibly well covered, as in fact the expectation is that by only the last months of this year, cruising is going to be largely back and running more full steam. Now, most of these funds that they've brought in to cover them right through to the end of summer have been in the form of loans, so they have also been placing and issuing shares. Now, these largely with institutional investors. So, for example, early in the shutdown, the Saudi sovereign fund, they took an 8% stake in the Carnival Corporation. Now, of course, all of this fundraising does mean the lines are carrying a huge amount of debt, and they're going to have to pay interest on, they're going to have to ultimately repay them over time. So we actually don't know on the downside, potentially what the impact of that whole burden will be on our onboard experience and so on. So that may be less good news later on. Smaller groups like Crystal, which is part of the massive Hong Kong Genting group, they also own, by the way, Dream and Star Cruises. After some initial concerns, they've confirmed funding, as have all the other lines that are owned by private or listed companies. So, whether it's Fred Olsen, it's Viking, it's Windstar, or river cruise lines like Amma Waterways, Avalon, Emerald across Europe, they have all raised funds and are well covered. So the first absolutely good cruise news is you should not have to worry that your favorite cruise line will be disappearing before cruising returns full steam. The second really good cruise news is there's going to be a lot of brand new ships, many with first time at sea features. So these are new ships for cruisers like you and me to try out. But on my count, it's a staggering 21 ships sailing with passengers for the very first time. Now this number includes 7 ships that were delivered to the lines in 2020 but were unable to enter service. And then there's at least another 15 ships that will definitely be completed in 2021. Now the 15 2021 ships alone will add 42,000 new berths of capacity cruising every single week. So the 7 ships from 2020 are Virgin Voyages Scarlet Lady, Celebrity Cruises Celebrity Apex, Enchanter Princess from Princess Cruises, P&O Cruises Iona, Silver Sea Cruises Silver Moon, Saga Cruises Spirit of Adventure, and Costa Cruises Costa Firenze. Now in the first half of 2021, depending on timing of cruise resumption, of course, we should see the following sailing or sailing being delivered: Viking Venus, Carnival Mardi Gras, Royal Caribbean Odyssey of the Seas, MSC Virtuosa, Ritz-Carlton Ivrima, Crystal Endeavour Expedition Ship, Aida Cosma, and Sea Cloud Spirit. Now in the second half, there will be Virgin Valiant Lady, Holland America Rotterdam, MSC Seashore, Silver Sea Silver Dawn, Princess Cruises Discovery Princess, Seabourn Venture Expedition Ship, and Costa Toscana. So the second really big good cruise news is that we are going to have many more brand new ships than ever before to try out. The shutdown means the first year back at sea, when it happens, it will be quite remarkable for the amount of new ships to try out in a really concentrated period of time. Of course, there is the good news that the rollout of vaccines through 2021 is likely to help cruising and, of course, travel more generally return back to closer to how it used to be. However, I think for the return of cruising in the immediate future over the next couple of months or so, that's not the main good news, because vaccines will take time to achieve the thresholds right around the world and in ports, etc., before they can have a really big impact across travel and cruising. So of course it's good news overall, but I believe the immediate good cruise news is that countries, cruise line associations, and the individual cruise lines themselves have agreed the actual protocols required for cruising to start up. The main stumbling block actually is now agreeing the actual dates for test cruises to run and opening up in places like the United States, UK, Spain, Australia, and so on. And then, of course, secondly, travel restrictions for the ports to open, moving between countries being lifted enough for cruises to operate as they used to do. But the good news is the actual protocols have been agreed for cruising to return, which I do believe is great news. Now, of course, for some of you, what is going to be required in those protocols is not widely liked, and it could mean that you're going to hold off cruising until it can be lifted. But the important thing is they have been agreed by all the major cruise country authorities. Now, the main elements, which actually have been tested successfully so far by Italian, German, Taiwan and Singapore sailings to date, but let's take a look at what these main things agreed are. First of all, 100% testing of all passengers and crew, often multiple tests before, during and at the end of the cruise. 2, reduced capacity for every sailings between 50% and 70% to enable distancing. 3, mask wearing inside the ship and at events outdoors when distancing is not going to be possible. 4, more, which is good news, digitally based muster drill. 5, there's going to be limits on the numbers at venues, events, at the pool, theatres, dining, usually requiring you to pre-book. 6, cruises to nowhere, or if calling on ports, then cruise line only excursions with no opportunity to self-explore. 7, enhanced cleaning, bigger medical facilities, isolation facilities. 8, there's going to be a track and trace capability, usually with wearable devices. And the ninth point is pre-agreed joint procedures if an outbreak occurs. And these are all agreed in advance with local country authorities, and we've seen these working, for example, with a false positive in Singapore. The fact that protocols have been developed and agreed, in my view, is good cruise news. The focus now is on when it can happen, not what has to happen before the good news that cruises in the big regions has returned. Now, for me, a really good piece of good cruise news, one that I hope will stay around but fear may not, is there is huge flexibility that cruise lines now offer with bookings. Now, before the pandemic, cruising was pretty rigid, with many having non-refundable deposits. It could be 10% or even more, final payments 90 days before, so months and months before, and there were large penalties for cancellations. Even if you wanted to swap out a passenger on existing bookings on some lines, that was pretty much impossible without huge penalties. So really, really inflexible. Now the lines are offering great flexibility, certainly until around May 2022 and beyond right now. They give you the ability to lift and shift bookings, and even deciding up to 48 hours before a cruise that you don't want to go, and instead of losing your money, you can take future cruise credit for the full amount. Let's take a look at a typical example rather than go through all the cruise lines. But a typical example is Royal Caribbean Group's Cruise with Confidence and Lift and Shift. So the Cruise with Confidence program, this currently means that Royal Caribbean will let you cancel any cruise that sets sails until the end of April 2022. One that you've done on existing bookings or bookings you make in the next month or so. And as long as you cancel at least 48 hours before your sail date, you receive a future cruise credit, which you then need to use before the end of April 2022. So that means great flexibility, which didn't exist before. Now, I actually expect the dates of these will move more and more into 2022, because each time they cancel more cruises, they push the dates further and further into 2022. The lift and shift option is also great. It's for guests who want to move an existing booking into next year. So Royal Caribbean, for example, they actually protect the original price or promotion if you've had it, if the alternative sailing is the same itinerary length and stateroom category at roughly the same time of the year. So you have to roughly move it within the same time of the year. So the good cruise news is that through into 2022, there is much more flexibility as you make bookings across all of the lines. And I think this is great, and fingers crossed that keeps happening. There's also really good news that there are now lots and lots and lots of deals and promotions, and these will keep on coming. And I think they will actually accelerate as cruising actually opens and the lines really know what they have sailing. Now, although there is definitely eagerness by existing cruise lovers like myself and probably you to be able to cruise as soon as possible, there is still overall reluctance, especially by new to cruise, which was expected to be a big part of who would fill the ships, and all those new ships, especially over the coming years. The cruise lines will be really keen and definitely eager to get people on board. And I remember that onboard spend is a significant part of cruise line revenue and profits. Most people spend an additional 50% or more of the cost of their fare once on the ship, with all those things that are going on. So there will be lots of incentives and lots of deals to get people cruising, and of course cruising really often. So the good news is you should expect and should look out for deals. So I recommend sign up right now to all of your favorite cruise lines to get their emails to stay on top of these. Now, are there any good cruise news stories that you think I have missed? Let me know by commenting. I'd love to hear if you think I've missed anything. And remember, I have loads more Tips for Travelers episodes packed full of cruising advice and tips. So why not go and enjoy another one right now?